Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlotte from At Charlotte's House. I am in my master bath. Today, I'm talking tile. The foundation when you're tiling is the most important part. I have gone ahead and patched the subfloor to make sure that that's in good shape. I used 5/8 of an inch plywood. That's perfect. Then I've gone ahead and put the concrete backer board. You need this under any tile that you're doing. I have attached my concrete backer board with thin set, so that is adhered to the subfloor. I have used screws that are intended for concrete backer board to screw that in place, and then I've taped the seams. All of these steps make sure that this foundation isn't gonna move. It's not gonna bow. It's not gonna move on me and crack the tile that's sitting on top of it. Really important. But I'm gonna start by marking the intersection of my room. So I've measured the longest part and the widest part, and I'm snapping a chalk line. This is gonna give me a grid where I'm gonna start my tile. I'm gonna move from the middle of my room towards the perimeter. The perimeter is gonna be much fussier because I have to clip and trim all the pieces to get them to fit in line. So for now, I'm marking my starting point. There we go. So now that I have that intersection, this is where I'm gonna start working with my tile. So let me get my supplies. I'll be right back. There's a couple things that you need to think about before you start with the tile itself. The first thing you need to be aware of is that your walls may not be parallel. Mine are definitely not. That's one of the reasons why I'm starting at the middle. I know that I have a square grid marked out here, so that if I start laying my tile, I may get to the walls and find that there's some wonky angles, but then I can cut my tile to fit. It'll be much easier, and you won't notice it as much because those sort of crooked pieces will be closer to the wall. The next thing you want to think about is the tile that you're using. It may have some variations in the material. Some marbles, for example, there's a big difference between one box and the next, so it might be smart for you to shuffle the different boxes so that you don't notice the difference in materials quite as much. I suggest you dry fit the entire floor to make sure everything fits, you like the way it looks. Don't get into any adhesive until you're sure that it works for you. You also want to make sure you're dealing with the right thin set. Read the labels, speak to your hardware store, speak to your tile expert. You want to make sure you have the right thin set for your tile material and for your substrate. You're also going to want to make sure you have the right trowel, and the trowel is going to depend on the seams between your tiles and the size of the tile. So I'm using a 3/16 of an inch trowel because I have fairly small tiles with a 1/8 of an inch gap between them. And then the last thing you're gonna need spacers. If you try to eyeball it in a larger space, you're gonna get yourself into trouble. So I promise, you're gonna wanna have spacers. Make sure that everything is aligned as you go, and you shouldn't have any trouble. So I'm gonna use just my basic putty knife that I feel like I've used for everything. And I'm gonna put a pretty thin coat. You can use your trowel for this too. Now I'm going to go back over with the trowel. I'm going to spread it out. And then I'm going to use the notches, and I'm going to work in bigger areas ultimately, but I just wanted to show you on the first one. So then you're going to use your notch. You want to make sure you have thin set everywhere you need it. And you're just going to pull. And that makes sure that you don't have too much thin set oozing up through your tiles, because that can affect how the grout looks, and you just won't like the look of it. So I have spacers that are intended for 1/8 of an inch. So you see how they fit right in there? So when I put my next bit of thin set down, I'm going to insert these spacers to make sure that my second sheet of tile is fitting the way I want it. I've decided that I'm going to stagger my tile. I'm hoping that that will make it a little bit easier for me to hide any imperfections. So I'm going to lay this style down in the middle a little bit. It's been a couple of hours, and as you can see, I've made good progress in here. I'm doing this a little bit differently. I'm leaving the edges untiled for the time being. I know I won't have time to get to everything today, so tomorrow this tile will have set up on the thin set. I can walk on it, and then I'll go around and cut and fill in the edges, and then I'll be ready to grout. You'll notice that even though I've used the spacers, there's still some places where you can tell the tile sheets are meeting or some of the tiles are closer together. Some of that is just user error. I'm not a professional tiler. Some of it is just the way the tiles have been laid onto the mesh backing. But once you go ahead and grout, it'll make it look much less obvious. If you're using a darker grout, that sort of imperfection will stand out more. So I would say if you're a real perfectionist, probably don't start with a darker grout until you're pretty adept at tiling. And the only things that you need to know about a tile saw is that you need a special blade. This is a diamond blade. You're actually not cutting through the tile, you're grinding through it, so that blade is super important. And then you also, this you can see, there's a reservoir of water that's underneath here, and you always want this to be full. So as the blade spins, it's going through that water so that you're keeping the tile and the saw wet so it doesn't heat up and it just stays neat and there's not dust everywhere. And then you definitely want safety goggles. You probably should have gloves. Do as I say, not as I do. I have some of my tiles here. They're all marked. I'm going to turn on the tile saw. It's going to be loud, and you just want to go slow. Let it grind. Don't force it. Ta-da!
Using my tile saw, I went around the perimeter and I cut tiles as needed, and I was able to finish laying the rest of the floor.
Welcome back, everyone. I am in my master bathroom. I have a sea of beautiful, glorious marble tile, and I am so excited to finish this project up. The last stage of this floor is the grout, and the grout is what makes this floor finally seem like it's official. I have mixed my grout in this bucket. You can buy pre-mixed grout. I found that the pre-mixed grout was so expensive that I ended up mixing my own. But if you're dealing with a tinted grout, a darker color, it might make sense to buy the pre-mixed because you have to mix it perfectly or else you might have a little disparity in the color between each batch. So just be aware of that. You're gonna mix it much like you did the thin set. You're gonna mix it until the description that I saw was sort of like toothpaste without any lumps and bumps, and that's what I have here. And grouting is actually pretty fun. It's not very hard. You're gonna go back and forth between your grout bucket, and then off camera I have a bucket of water, and all you need for this is a sponge, a float, and then something to smack your grout in place. You might be completely obsessing over all the little joints that aren't perfect. Once you put grout in, you're not gonna notice those joints. So that's why this is such a fun step. So all you're gonna do is you're gonna smack your grout down, and then you're gonna use a float. There's a couple different versions. I'm using a gum rubber grout float, and then you're just going to, at about a 90-degree angle, do you see how I'm pulling the grout across the tiles? And when I do that, it's getting all the grout down into the tiles, and it's making my tile floor finally look real. It is official. So once you've put all the grout down, you're gonna go back over it with your sponge, and you're just gonna clean it up so that you don't have a haze. Now, there's two different types of grout. There's sanded grout and there's unsanded grout. For larger joints, you're gonna want a sanded grout. My joints are less than 1/8 of an inch, so I could use this smooth grout, but I'm just gonna keep going. Grout, wash, grout, wash. You want to rinse your tiles pretty well. There are products that will help remove the film, but it's easier if you can get rid of most of it right off the bat. I could not love this tile more than I do. Adding the grout brings the whole thing together. Do you remember where we started? We had dull, vinyl, adhesive, scratched, dirty tile, and now I have this luxe, chic, modern hexagonal marble. I am obsessed. It makes such a difference to the room. The whole space feels brighter, it feels more updated, and it just is a showstopper. I know that tiling a floor isn't a small project compared to painting the walls or changing the shower curtain, but it is a lot smaller than replacing a vanity or moving a vanity or moving a shower. Those are big time projects that can cost a lot of money. If you learn to tile yourself, this sort of a project changes the entire space, and the only cost that you have is for the materials. I think that is a really smart update. I couldn't love it more than I do, and I cannot wait to share the rest of the room with you. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel to get all these updates. Thanks for watching.